In this video, we're going to talk about loops in Python, and we will discuss while loops and for loops. If you want to learn more about Python and other programming languages, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please like it. It will be a great support. Let's begin. Well, let's first talk about while loop. With the while loop, we can execute a set of statements as long as a condition is true. Okay, so for example, you have a dictionary, tuple, and you want to loop through that list, tuple or dictionary, as long as a condition is true. Okay, so let's see how we can do this. For example, here we need a counter, like for example, I equals to 1. This is our counter, and I'll actually tell you how we can use this counter. And you use a while keyword, and in here you have to actually specify a condition, and as long as that condition is true, you can actually loop through whatever you want. So let's see what we can use. Here, for example, we use I less than, for example, 3. Okay, so as long as I is less than 3, actually this block of code, which is inside the while, will be executed. For example, I want to print something like print this counter. Okay, and if actually I leave it like this, it will continue forever, because in here I equals to 1 and it is actually less than 3, and print will be executed, and next time, actually after the execution of this line, which is print, it will actually go back to this condition, and because this condition is still true, it will print counter again. So you have to actually increase this counter in order to stop this while from executing. So let's see here, I use I equals to I plus 1. Okay, so in each iteration I is increasing by 1, so when it reaches to 3, this actually condition will not be true anymore, so it will jump out of this block. If I leave it like this, it will continue forever. Let's execute it. Okay, as you see here, it is printing 1 and it will not stop. Okay, so now let's see how we can actually stop this while loop. So you can use here I equals to I plus 1, and in each iteration it will actually I will be increased by 1, and when it reaches to 3, it will get out of this block. So, and you have to bear in mind whenever you want to use a while loop or for loop or if conditions, and we talked about this concept, but I want to review this again. You have to bear in mind that you pay attention to the indentation here, and if you, for example, leave this line like this, for example like this, you will face error. Okay, because this indentation or this space is not equal to this one, they have to be equal. Okay, so if I run it, you see here this error. Okay, so be careful about indentation. And after this line, I want to print something. Actually, this is outside this while loop, so I use print and, for example, end of while. So if I actually run it, you see here we have 1 and 2, because the first time I equals to 1 and it will print 1, and after that it will be increased by 1. I mean I will be increased by 1, and after that it will be checked by this condition. So because it is 2 now and it is still less than 3, this actually print will be also executed, and after that I is increased by 1, which is actually equal to 3, and this condition is not true, so it will jump out of this block and this line is executed. Now I'm going to talk about break statement. With the break statement, you can stop the loop even if actually the while condition is still true. For example, in here I want to change it to, for example, 10. Okay, and as long as I is less than 10, this block is actually executed. Okay, so I want to change this actually code and turn it into something that actually prints I whenever it is less than 3. Okay, so when I actually the counter reaches to 3, I want to actually stop this while from actually executing. Okay, so how I can do that? Well, in here you can use if statement and also use break statement inside that if. I'll tell you how you can do this. For example, in here, whenever I is printed, after that I want to check, okay, whether I is equal to 3, okay, and after that, whenever I is equal to 3, I want to execute this code break, and it will jump out of actually this loop, and in other words it will stop this loop. Okay, so if I actually execute this code, you will see that I is printed actually 1, 2, and whenever it is 3, it is printed when it is 3, and after that, because this condition is true, it will actually reach to this line and break out of this loop. So if I run it, you see here 1, 2, and 3 are printed, and when it reaches to this line, it will actually go inside this block, and break will stop actually this loop. So in here you can use also other codes. For example, here you can use print. We are inside if statement. Okay, and you see here when it reaches to this line, we are inside if statement, and it will jump out of this while. Now let's talk about else statement. You know, when we talked about conditions, if condition, we talked about else and elif, but in here, in actually loops, we also have else, and we will talk about this else. Okay, this time we can run a block of code once the condition no longer is true. Okay, we can use else statement, okay, in order to do that. For example, in here, after this line, I want to use else. Be careful about indentation. And in here, else is referred to this while. Okay, this is not about this one. Okay, be careful about indentation. And in here, after else, I want to, for example, print something like I is greater than 10, for example. So in here, you have to actually comment this one. Let's delete this, okay, to see the output. Well, let me run it. So as you see here, it is printed, actually I is printed up to 9, and when it reaches to 10, this condition is no longer true. It will actually go inside this else condition, okay, and this line is executed. Okay, this is printed actually, so this line is executed, and this one print is actually out of these loops and else. Okay, it is not related to them. You can delete it. Let me delete this one, and if I run it again, you see the result is the same, and that line is not printed anymore. Now let's talk about for loops. For loops actually are used for iterating over a sequence, and that sequence might be a list, a tuple, a dictionary, even a string. And with the for loops, we can execute a set of statements, okay, once for each actually item in the list, in a dictionary, and etc. Let's see an example here. I want to define a list. We talked about list, dictionary, set, and tuple in actually separate videos. I highly recommend you, if you do not know the concept of these actually data type, please watch those videos in order to be familiar with them. And we also talked about loops and in those videos, and how to loop through each of these data types. And in here we want to talk more about them. If you are not familiar with them and if you want to learn more about them, I refer you to those videos. I'll put the link in the description. So let's here have an example. For example, fruit equal to banana, apple, and for example orange. Okay, these are my fruits, and I want to look through them. And for example, in here I use for, and we need a counter. We do not need this counter to be defined before. We just need to create it in here. For example, CNT is the counter, and for example, I use in and fruits. Let's use fruits in here, fruits, and in here fruits, and in here And because we are looping through each iteration of this list and each of them is a fruit, I want to use fruit here. This is the name of a variable. You can change it to whatever you want. You can name it Alex, you can name it X, whatever you want. This is just a variable, but in order to be more meaningful, I use fruit. And in here I want to print fruits. Okay, and as you see here, each of the item of this list is printed. So by using for, we could actually loop through the item of this list. You can change this list to, for example, a string, and you can loop through each letter of this string. For example, actually let's use orange, and in here our fruits is orange, and fruit in here, which is not actually meaningful, this variable, but I want to just show you the concept. And if I run it, you see each of the letters of this string is printed. So you could use for in order to loop through a string and a list, a dictionary, tuple, and you can also loop through a set. Well, let's see how we can use a break statement in order to stop the loop before it has actually looped over all the items. For example, let me actually bring this list here, and in here I want to just print banana and apple. When it reaches to orange, I don't want it to be printed. Okay, so let's use if. I actually taught you in previous part when we talked about loops, and I show you how you can use if and break. In here we want to try it again. We use if here and fruit. If fruit equals to, for example, orange, okay, I want to break out of this loop, and I don't want the next actually code to be executed. Okay, in here I break, and as you see here, we expect that orange will not be printed. So if I run it, you see banana and apple, because when it's actually reached to orange as the last item of the list, it will check here. When it reaches to orange, it will break out of this loop, and this line is not executed. Let's talk about range function. In order to loop through a set of code a specified number of times, for example 10 times, 20 times, okay, you can use range function. How you can use this? Range function actually returns a sequence of numbers starting from 0, and it is increased by 1 each time, and actually ends at a specified number. So this specific number, you will determine this specific number. Let me show you by example. For x in range, okay, and you have to pass a number, for example 8. You have to bear in mind that it will print from 0 to 8, and this 8, this specific number, is not included. Okay, so let me print this x, and you see the result here. So as you see here, it is printed from 0 to 7, and this one, which is 8, that actual number is not included. We can also use two parameters in order to determine the start number and the actually end number. So in here, it is started by default from 0, and you can change it, for example, to 3. Okay, in here I use 3 as the first parameter and 8 as the last parameter, and you know it will start from 3. 3 is included, but 8 is not included. You can also use a third parameter in order to determine this actual step of increment. Okay, for example, I want to actually print something from 3 to 8, and I want to actually change the steps from 1, which is the default, to 2. Okay, as if I run it, you see here 3 is printed, and after 3, 4 is not printed, 5 is printed, because it will actually increase by 2, okay, instead of 1. And in here 7 is printed. You can change it to 3, and we expect that 3 is printed, and after that 6 is printed, and the next one, which is 9, is not in this range. So if I run it, you see just 3 and 6 is printed. As I taught you in a while loop, there is actually else keyword in for loop too. Okay, the else keyword in for loops actually specifies a block of code to be executed when the loop is finished. Okay, so in here for x in, for example, range 3, okay, in here I want to print actually x, and after that I want to use else, be careful about indentation here, and I want to print finished. If I execute it, you see, after this actually loop is finished, this line is executed, which is inside this else. You can also actually write other line of code inside this block. Let's talk about nested loops. A nested loop is a loop inside the other loop. The inner loop will be executed one time for each iteration of the outer loop. We need to lists in here, like for example in here adjective is the first list, for example red and big, okay, and we need another list, for example fruits, and I want to use for example apple and orange, okay. So in here, I want to actually look through these two lists, and I want to use for x in adjectives. So for each adjectives, for each item of this list, okay, I want to use all these items of this fruit. So in here, for each iteration of this loop, which is x, for example, is the first time red and the second time big. Okay, so the first time it is red, and I want to actually say that the apple is red and the orange is red. Okay, so I have to use for here for y in fruits. Okay, and here I want to print y and actually x. Okay, if I execute it, you see here the result actually apple in here for this loop, and the first time is apple, and x is showing this adjective is the same for these two. Okay, so because whenever this for is executed, x is the same, and after that when it reaches to here, there is no code, it will jump back to adjective and change the item, and with the same item with the same x, this loop is printed again, and as you see here, 2 times red is printed and 2 times big is printed. The last concept that I want to talk about is pass statement. For loops cannot be empty, but sometimes for some reasons you have for loop with no content, it is empty. Okay, but in order to actually avoid getting error, you can use pass statement. Okay, so let's see how we can use this. For example, we have for x in range 3, and in here there is no content, we just need to use pass. Okay, if I leave it like this, you will face error, but if I use pass statement here, you have no error. Okay, everything is fine. Okay, here is the end of this session. I hope it was useful for you. Now I believe you know everything you need to know about loops, and if you want to learn more about them and more about actually working with loops with tuples, dictionary and set, I highly recommend you to refer to the previous videos, and in those videos I talked about loops in dictionary, set, tuple and list. If you want to learn more about Python and other programming languages, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you enjoyed this video, please like it. If you have any questions, leave comment. I'll reach you as soon as possible. Bye for now.